The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. On that day, as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took Jesus with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up, and waves were breaking over the boat, so that it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." The wind ceased, and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this whom even the wind and the sea obey?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Oh, my Papa, to me he was so wonderful. And Daniel Joseph Reagan really was so wonderful. He taught me generosity and the importance of presence, the importance of being with and having a good time with your family and friends. When I displayed a lack of athletic ability as a youth, or got into some foolishness as a teenager, he showed me great compassion. I rejoice in his life and his love as we celebrate another one of those hallmark holidays. I think Father's Day almost brings more warmth to the hearts and pockets of the greeting card industry than it does to the fathers among us. I know that not all of us can rejoice in the love and life of our fathers. Some of our fathers were abusive, or abandoned us, or died before we even got to know them. Still, most of us can rejoice in the blessing that our dads are to us. And in a world filled with troubles and anxieties, I think it's always a good thing to rejoice in our blessings. My anxiety these days has a lot to do with what I see going on in the church and not going on in the church. I find our gathering here every week to be a powerful spiritual experience, and yet many people we know to be Catholic on this island no longer join us to celebrate the Eucharist. Your own children, perhaps, no longer view the church with the same interest and commitment that you have. It hurts. Younger people show little interest in becoming priests. And those of us still around are growing older and fewer. Our parish is the perfect size, but few priests get to experience the blessing that I have. They are not just pastoring one little church, but 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4. And of course, we're confronted with the relentless exposure of past sexual abuse. and the painfully inadequate response to it by church leaders. Now, our bishops, for better or more likely for worse, seem to be jumping into the middle of our divisive politics. It seems to me that the church, which has often been called the bark or ship of Peter, is taking on a lot of water these days. My dad was a man of faith and somewhat of a church historian. He knew things about the church that most Catholics were clueless about. He knew the church always faced stormy times. But he also knew, by God's grace, that the church always survived those storms. Since the earliest time, the church has recognized the story of the disciples in the storm-tossed boat as a picture of the church. Under threat from destructive forces, their survival is dependent on staying together in the boat and trusting God to do something. The community that St. Mark wrote this gospel for way back then was threatening to break up. It was overwhelmed by persecution and internal divisions. St. Mark knew that facing into stormy times was the very nature of the church on mission. We wouldn't be sent on mission to our world if everything in our world was wonderful. There's sin abroad in our world and in our church and in us. But that is not the whole story. The Spirit of God is also at work in the world, in our church, and in us as well. It is the nature of storms that they are scary. When you're in the middle of a storm, you're in the middle of the storm. Chaos. To know that storms are to be expected doesn't make being in the midst of one any less scary. I never knew weather anxiety until I got to Tybee in hurricane season. St. Mark showed the disciples panicking and crying out, "Master, do you not care? We're going down." Hardly a surprising reaction, given that the waves were breaking into the boat so that it was almost swamped. But Jesus was a little annoyed with their reaction. They woke him up. "Why are you so frightened? How is it that you have no faith?" How did he expect them to react? To let them sleep regardless? And to let the boat get completely swamped? It seems what he was trying to do is to have them trust him completely. Either to do something, in which in fact he did, or to do nothing, but always to trust that all somehow would be well. So I think the takeaway from today's gospel is simply this: whatever is going on, whatever your anxieties may be, don't panic. Do what you can do, and then trust God. He is with us. It is His church, not ours. We do what we can, and then we trust. stay together in the boat that is the church, even if it's getting swamped, and trust in God's grace. Take time to rejoice in your blessings and trust in God's love. Enjoy your family and friends and trust that they can be a sign of God's presence to you. Hold on to the faith of our fathers and trust that God will always have the last word. And it will be a word of life and a word of love. Amen.